Haven't even. Yeah. Okay. We're recording. We're recording now. Yeah. You don't. I'm not very good when it comes to flattery, so you need to stay away from that. But
Uh-oh.
dude, I did hear. I don't know if at the end of practice I got a phone call. And it's one of my good buddies, and I think you'll like the story a little bit. I won't say too much because I think I'm gonna try to have him on the show. But he's got a pretty good wrestling story, and kind of falls in line with I think what maybe you wanted to talk about a little bit is like kind of how to handle life after wrestling a little bit. And he's one of my good friends, and he's doing this thing now where he's a part of this nonprofit in East St. Louis, which is technically in Illinois, but he's like it's this nonprofit that basically like helps out with kids that it's like kind of like a childcare thing, but it's for people with low economic status. So like they'll drive around, they'll pick kids up from school, and then they'll take them to like different sporting stuff. So like the high school, like they'll go and they'll pick up the high school kids from two different high schools, and they'll bring them to like this club practice, and they'll do the same thing with two different middle schools, and then basically take them home. So it's like childcare and stuff. But it's like all based around like faith and obviously helping kids out and families out and stuff like that. But anyways, it's kind of cool hearing his story, and it kind of got me thinking a lot about maybe where he was in his point at different phases after he was done competing in college, and just trying to figure his life out. His it's pretty gnarly road, and again, I don't want to spoil it too much because I do want to have him be able to tell the story. But it just kind of got me thinking that, I think for a lot of us, when wrestling becomes our identity and we're not doing it anymore, it's really hard, I think, for us to kind of figure out what's next and how to like properly handle it. Because I think if you handle everything that comes at you like a wrestling match, I think a little bit maybe filled with ego or like you can't just attack everything. You know what I mean? Like I think you have to have a little more tact, like especially like with relationships and things like that. It kind of just got me thinking about, conversations that we've had in the past where I think, oftentimes I think it's easy for us to kind of put wrestling in the center just because it's still a big part of our lives. But it might be like maybe something that takes up a lot of our time, but it shouldn't be necessarily what makes us us and like totally drives us in a lot of ways.
Yeah, no, I totally understand where you're coming from. And I think that, oftentimes, especially people who kind of, like you said, I mean, a lot of us, we still quote unquote identify as a wrestler, but it's kind of figuring out your place beyond that and how you can use wrestling as a tool is really important and realize that, the competition part of wrestling is a small bleep in the whole thing, and there's many chapters to the story. And so, even recently, you and I have both had to experience some really tough kids on our team who, we really care about having to wrestle off at the end of the season here, and some of them not getting to compete at the end of their season. And, that's tough stuff. And part of what we love about wrestling is it kind of, as our Pastor Andrew said, is it's not life, but it mirrors life really well. It gives you some of those same emotions, and, you can work really hard and still be disappointed sometimes. And, everything doesn't happen on our timing. So I think that figuring out, like you said, especially us that really commit to wrestling and we try to compete at a high level and we go on and we wrestle in college, we probably have huge goals and aspirations. And oftentimes, those are kind of things that, many people don't reach. I had some pretty crazy aspirations growing up as a kid and and for lots of different reasons, I didn't reach those. And I was telling a kid today, we are sitting down, we are talking, we're having lunch, and he was one of those kids that kind of had that disappointing moment and that loss. And I was, explaining to him how sometimes we're up so close to things we can't really see the full picture, right? And we think that little part of it's the whole thing, and it's not. And it's taken me a long time to get to that point, to be honest, and to let go of, the quote unquote shame or disappointments of not achieving those goals. But the part that lets you do that is realizing all the character that the process built inside you, and that, really the accolades are the icing on the cake, if you will. They're just the parts that, yeah, they're cool, but like everything else in life, they kind of fade, right? And their significance, if you're still talking about them and things like that, like, it's not really where you want to hang your hat. We're supposed to grow beyond those moments. And It's been a process, and thankfully, I've been able to kind of ease into that process of letting go of that identity through being able to coach. I feel like, but just like you alluded to, even as coaches, just letting go of it being our time and letting it be the kids' time, I think is really important to make it a positive experience for the kids. So that it's not about us and it is about them and their character development. And I think as we wrestle with that ourselves, and transition out of wrestling as our identity, it's just going to make us better people. It's going to help us put it into perspective for kids so that they don't, they recover from the great disappointment that something that you invest so much in, can create sometimes in wrestling. And, um, you know, uh, I guess in talking to that kid, I know I'm kind of going on, a rant here on it, but, and talking to the kid I was talking to today, yeah, just I was telling him at 43 years old, being able to have all this time to reflect on it and see the whole picture, I'm a lot more grateful for the people, the relationships, and the character that wrestling built in my life than any, accolade that I could have ever achieved. And we all see sometimes people who, achieve great things in wrestling but don't take the character traits with them. That's kind of a shame. And you know, um, so again, it's just been a thing that helps me realize that, um, you know, again, it's a great tool for us to connect with kids and to teach them to do hard things. But really, the objective is always, I think, building that self-confidence that, they're not afraid to fail and try things. And, those characteristics as I've had to go out and figure out, what's next, the competitiveness inside me, the drive, the willingness to do whatever it takes to get the job done. Those kind of things have really paid dividends, in my life. And, I think a book that I've read before that is really good is a book called Grit. And, it's really made me reflect reading that book on, we like to point to talent, we like to point to giftedness and things like that of why people succeed. But oftentimes it's the resilience and the grit and the willingness to fail, to learn and grow. And those are the gifts the sport of wrestling gives us. And if we kind of reflect on those things and then the relationships, the people that have inspired us and helped us, to transition things like a guy named Gary Chapman was my coach that, I always tell people he was the best coach I ever had that never wrestled. Because, the things that he told me, like, do the right thing, Sean, winning takes care of itself, those kind of things, the seeds he planted, they really paid dividends in other aspects of my life when I realized that, Gary wasn't coaching me really to be a wrestler as much as he was to try to help me grow into a better man. And, um, that has inspired me to continue to get better. As a coach, you come in early and it is about wrestling. And I think the longer I've coached and the more I'm in it, wrestling is just a tool, right? It's just a conduit. It's just the way to connect with the kids, the way to try to grow and you know, when I think I'm helping them grow, all of a sudden I look in the mirror and I realize, oh crap, like I
Yeah.
kind of need to shed that part of myself too, or I need to get rid of that ego, aspect to myself as well. And it's just the blessing of investing in others is we often through investing in others we get to see where we need to grow too. So anyhow, yeah, letting go of that identity and realizing and having some perspective for what wrestling is. And I think it's a lot more common these days, I read a lot of articles, I know you do too, on a lot of the guys that are successful and being able to put it in perspective is really important and not making it their identity, just something that they love to do. And many of the guys are out there obviously saying that they're using it as a way to glorify God and the gifts they've been given. So
Yeah, and I think this is I mean we talk a lot and it was funny. I was like, man, what are we going to talk about on this podcast? Because I feel like we
me
talk
too.
about everything all the time. But I was thinking about this one thing is kind of you just brought it up, and I feel like it's definitely ego, but I feel like when I first started coaching, I felt like I had a lot to prove. Like I had this chip on my shoulder, and that's kind of like something that's helped me a lot as a competitor, is like having that chip because it was very much about me and like me breaching my goals. And I think, there's a lot of things that I think I got better as a coach in terms of like skill and like practice and like training, plans and things like that because I was really hungry to get better. But I think the bigger picture stuff that maybe I wasn't quite thinking about, I wasn't really paying attention to until you and I like started being around each other a little bit more. And I think we've talked about this before, but I mean, I remember, you and Coach Nas were coaching Ethan. I think it was Ethan his sophomore or his junior. It was probably his junior year, or no, it was I think it was his sophomore year actually at Valley, and like I like jumped in front of you guys to like make this call or whatever, and thank God it worked out because Josh probably would have killed me, but um, it was one of those things where you talked to me after. It's like maybe that was the right call, maybe not. Like it worked out, but like it was it the right call jumping in front of another coach and like especially one that's coaching his son, like and it was one of those things that I think kind of really got me thinking about what am I actually doing? And I think it's like if I'm all about winning as a coach, it's like that's not really my goal. It's like winning, like you said, winning is going to be a byproduct of doing the right things. And I think trying to figure out what the right thing is the most important thing. I think it's just hard sometimes. But I think what I mentioned earlier, like one of my good friends, like really kind of struggled figuring out like, well, what's the right path, And I think what he's doing now and kind of being in a spot where you can kind of get back and help other people, and that's kind of like his job. It's like, well, that's your goal. It's not win. It's help these kids, have a better life.
Yeah, again, it's that ability to be able to kind of be years down the road. At 43 now, we have some guys in the room that I coached when they're literally, 7, 8 years old, like Trent Tracy and others, Ryan Morphus, et cetera. And just seeing those kids and not only those kids that went on to wrestle in college, honestly, man, like seeing the kids who come back and say how, it just gave them confidence in other things and, it helped them achieve other things. Just reinforces the idea that, yeah, man, the accolades that we get, those are fun and, they kind of put wind in our sails and things like that. But I think if we keep our objective to build relationships and to inspire kids, um, it really just keeps us going. And I'm very, very fortunate that I had some amazing coaches at a young age. Not just obviously in technique, but just men that were willing to show love and give a hug and big smiles on their face when you're crying and give you a big hug, like those kind of things. Where that unconditional love that the men that were strong, tough, successful men were willing to show, I think was something that, always was special to me. And, people like Gary again, saying, you're a legend and, before you, and you don't even know it and just
Yeah.
kind of feeding you little nuggets of inspiration and, just having that gleam in their eye when they look at you and, seeing you as your best self, even your worst self. Those are the kind of things that, I always admired and I continually try, and I'm my own person, right? I'm not those people. I understand that. And, I do it in my own way. And, but they're definitely the reason. And they're people who I look at and I think like, man, they had a life of purpose, a life of meaning because, all those little things carry on, and the people that they touch and the hearts that they inspired. So, and it's just it's a great way to make sure that your life's not all about the wrong things, is staying involved with kids and being humbled by, some of the things sometimes we get really caught up in wrestling and then life serves us some reality with things that kids are struggling with that we didn't know. And we've all kind of shared in some of those experiences with our kids. And all of a sudden, I think as coaches, we've even, fortunately been able to come together and be like, oh man, like maybe wrestling's not everything right now, right? And so yeah, just being around people, seeing the struggles, and having, parents be vulnerable to you with their struggles and then coming full circle and being a dad myself and some of those things I remember in my early days coaching, like if I'm very, very honest, I remember having discussions with other coaches. Oh, it's the parenting, blah, blah, blah. Well, I've had to eat some of those words, So again, it's that thing in wrestling that we know when we get served humble pie, and I've had to been served some of that humble pie as a parent, from early days, making some judgments about how kids act or this or that, and thinking it's all about the parents. And everybody's doing their best. We all have different upraisings, and it takes a community. So I'm just fortunate that we get to be here. And I look back at my early years in my early 20s sometimes, and I'm like, wow, man, like those parents trusted me to to do all that with these kids, and fortunately, a lot of times it worked out really well, and like I said, those kids have come back as men and parents, and seeing them successful, and being able to say that I had a little small part of an inspiration in their life is super meaningful to me because I had so many of those people touch me and really inspire me throughout my life. And like we started out with saying that, it's not about wrestling. Wrestling's something that we all have a deep passion for because when we learn to transition it, man, like, you know, I'm, now an insurance producer, and it has a really high failure rate for the first, 3 to 5 years that you go at it because you hear a lot of no's, right? You fail a lot before you succeed, a lot more than you succeed in trying to get accounts and build up some money and make it meaningful. And um, definitely wrestling is something that gave me the tools to be resilient. And instead of dwelling on in my sorrow and thinking I'm not good at it, every single time there's that loss, you didn't make a sell, you reflected on it and you try to figure out, all right, what did I do wrong? How could I have done better? What was the objection that I wasn't prepared for. I wasn't prepared for it, right? And so, just being willing to go and step on the line again and go for it, and learn as you go. That's paid dividends. And then also, I think the other aspect is being able to kind of ignore naysayers, right? People who maybe, when you say, hey, I want to own my own agency one day, and you got a lot of people that when you share that kind of a dream with them, kind of like when you share with people, hey, I want to be a state champion, national champion, whatever it may be, you might have a lot of people that kind of want to rain on that idea. And, I think wrestling again, it's that thing that gives you the tenacity to make big goals and then to understand it's not going to be easy, but if I keep working and making adjustments and I'm willing to fail to get there, I can get there. And so that's been huge, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's funny. We were just hanging out with Tristan the other day, and it's kind of one of those things where like you never really know what you're going to say to somebody or say to a kid that they're going to really kind of remember. But I remember during COVID, that's when I kind of came over to Frontier, and I was working with Tristan and stuff, and he was talking about where he wanted to go to school, and he was kind of like waiting to kind of see what his girlfriend was going to do, and I'm like, dude, you're really gonna decide your whole future on like your high school girlfriend? Like, there's a good chance you guys aren't even gonna be together, and they're still together. And he made a point to remind me of what I said, and I like it took me a second. I'm like, no, I probably did say that to him, but it was one of those things where I kind of backpedaled a little bit. I'm like, hey, like I wasn't saying you shouldn't be with her. I was just saying you shouldn't necessarily decide your whole future based on a high school relationship like that, but. I think it's kind of like what you said. It's like it's very easy for people that couldn't fathom it, or maybe it didn't work out for them, to just kind of hate on your dream or hate on things that you want to do, even if it's maintaining a high school relationship and trying to figure out where you want to go for college, just because
Yeah.
my high school relationship didn't work out, obviously.
Yeah, yeah, it's almost like, I think we have a tendency to look at reflect on our life story and kind of like mold somebody else into like as if, they're going to live the same story. And if you just make these adjustments here and there, then you're going to give them the right advice. And, you know, um, everybody's got a different path. Everybody's going to bump their head in different ways. And, you know, I think one of the things that's really humbled me is really not realizing, God's patience. And, sometimes I lose my patience and I think of that and I feel pretty silly
Yeah.
about the things that I grow impatient with, whether it's being a father or the kids, not quote unquote listening, right? Or not picking up on technique, whatever it is. And that's just, I think, growing my faith in my life, reading, the word and then building my relationship with God and really realizing the infinite patience that he's had, for me to use my talents in the right way and to ask, for him to help me do that. Um, it just really humbles me and makes me reflectively look back and want to offer more patience to others. Um,
Well,
and
patience is a part of like that unconditional love, which like I think for a lot of people, I think it's hard maybe to understand what that really feels like, until maybe they get a little bit older and things kind of get put in perspective a little bit. Like I was trying to, I think, quantify it in a speech to our high school kids, and I feel like I kind of missed the mark a little bit. But like, you know, like a parent's love, like that's unconditional. They're gonna love you no matter what. You're gonna mess up. You're gonna steal their car and crash it. Like you're gonna. Uh, I did this thing where back when texting wasn't unlimited, like I think I learned how to text and I was texting a girl or something like that and went like however many dollars over the amount. My mom flipped out, still loved me,
yeah,
chewed me
yeah,
out, but like still loved me. I think, like the way that God's relationship with us is like God loves us no matter what. And I think like in our relationships that we build through wrestling and outside of it, it's like until we really kind of feel that love, it's a hard thing I think to try to implement. And the same thing with patience, I feel like.
yeah. So one of the epiphany moments I'll share is that I used to think that wrestling was like my thing. It was like, all my successes and all of my failures were all me, right? And that's a tough place to put yourself in, and that was kind of that wrestling mentality, right? Is that, you own it no matter what, this absolute ownership type mentality. And if I didn't win, it's because I didn't work hard enough or I didn't sacrifice enough. And and that's a tough place to be. I think that realizing that, reflectively again, getting to see the whole picture and realizing that there are a lot of people that, you know, it, you know, were able to touch me and inspire me and grow my passion for the sport. And a lot of the way that they grew that passion was that unconditional love. We talked about it, touched on it briefly earlier. And, I can literally, had some moments reflectively looking back and remembering as a little kid coming off the mat, heartbroken, thinking that I, just lost this huge match, right? And having my coaches just love on you as you come off the mat and then you go on and later that day, all your buddies are still your buddies and the parents, you go back to the stands and they're all proud of you and they think you did great. And, those are good lessons to learn. Like, people that care about you and love you, they love you, at your greatest and they love you at your lowest. And, um, yeah, that's kind of something that has, really taught me a lot. And then the other thing about wrestling that I've learned to transition is, you know, uh, sometimes really realizing that we got to get better. We got to kind of throw some things away. Maybe not do things that we did before. And I think
Like
marriage.
what?
Oh, well,
Can you think of anything?
oh, I think a lot of things, but so but just the willingness to like kind of look deep inside yourself and not like blame the ref or whatever, or blame your opponent and say, oh, I just can't beat him. Like I think that kind of learning those things and going in those dark hallways, like honestly, has helped me to get better in marriage, which has been a process. And my wife has shown a lot of grace. uh, you know allowing me to grow some of my stubbornness and intensity and some of those things that I that came from wrestling, that can be good, can sometimes be your worst enemy too when you're trying to domineer over everybody in your household to do
That's what I was
things
talking
your
about
way.
the wrestling match thing. Like you can't treat like your marriage like a wrestling match. Like
Uh-uh.
you're
No,
not wrestling.
that and golf, right? For the first time I golfed too, I had to
Oh
learn
yeah.
I couldn't just choke the club and get better,
My father-in-law Sean took Emma out to golf the other day, and they were talking. He was I think actually trying to help me. He's like, yeah, Brian's too strong with the club. Like I'm trying to like muscle the ball, but you can't do that. It's
No,
finesse.
got to loosen up, man. Got to
Yeah.
loosen up. Can't be so intense. But yeah, there's so many transitional lessons. But you know, I think that there's also this thing. I remember when I first got in wrestling, the owner of the agency that I worked for, we were kind of going around. It was all the sales guys, and he wanted us to be involved with something, right? Like Rotary Club or some kind of business networking group, and he wanted us to be signed up for two of them. And I remember as we went around and got to me, and I was like, I think I was doing Lions Club, and I was like, and I'm also a wrestling coach. So does that count as my other kind of community involvement, you know? And I remember he had some choice words about that and said something like, oh, what is that going to do? Get you some wrestling moms? And I remember thinking, like, man, he doesn't understand the wrestling community because I'll tell you what, man, that has been huge in making it. If you know somebody that knows somebody, like they're willing to give you a shot, at least, within the wrestling community. And so that's been huge. And I've been actually talking to a lot of our seniors this year who, are kind of weighing the option of whether or not they wrestle in college. And, um, it is a tough one, but for a lot of them, obviously, I'm biased, and I think it's a great tool. But one of the things I tell them is, you got a stack of resumes with people with quote unquote work experience in college, and then you got like a little stack of resumes that have college athlete. And I don't know about you, but for me, it kind of usually gets your name pulled, right? And you at least get
Yeah.
an opportunity to get a conversation, or sometimes you only got to put your resume in because somebody that knows somebody gets you an interview. And that's kind of been my experience in the wrestling network, and not only people that directly wrestled, but people that are family members of wrestlers, right? They're willing to give you a shot because there's a lot of respect for the sport. I think people realize the level of discipline it takes to have any level of success in the sport. And again, I think it's a great tool to kind of help build those kind of same things in these kids. And by the way, it's been awesome getting to coach with you, and um,
Yeah.
yeah, it's been awesome getting to coach with you and the other group of guys, and just learning from everybody's personality. I think it's really important. One of the things I've learned as a coach too is, different kids gravitate towards different coaches, the personalities, right? And it's good for them to have those different people. I always appreciated. I remember in high school, I always felt like we had a great team of coaches, right? Everybody had their role. One might have been the more technician, one was more of the father figure that kind of was able to kind of push us in a better direction when we weren't making good decisions, and the other guy was our inspiration and the heart. And between them, man, we had a pretty dynamic group, and a lot of special people come out of that group. So anyhow, I think being around a group of men who I think we've all really agreed that we love the sport, we love being able to influence kids, and we've all been able to kind of knock down our ego and work together, and you know um, just want to say that's been awesome, man. And I got a lot of thinking this year to do. That whether what my role is going to be next year. I got two little guys that are going to be youth wrestling that haven't got as much attention as I would like because I've been so focused with the high school group, and not only my son who's a senior, but his group of friends. And man, we started a wrestling with faith group with those kids and stuff. So it's just I've grown super close to all those kids. I'm excited. Like I think we've all been fortunate as coaches. No matter what those kids do as wrestlers, I think they're gonna do good things. They're gonna go on to be good men, and I'm excited that we all got to be a part of that.
Yeah, I was actually just thinking, I think we've talked about this story before, but I think the first time we met, well, actually, let me tell you about the first time I met Trayton. So I knew the name Sheets. Like I heard your name a lot my first year. And I remember I was running the middle school group, and the guys are working out, and I think Trayton had came in maybe a little bit late, and I'd never seen him before. I'm like, "Who are you?" And he's like, "I'm Trayton, like Trayton Sheets," like as if like who are you, dude? Like
Hmm.
who are you?
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, last name Sheets. Like, okay, I feel like I know that name. I'm like, okay, yeah, whatever. Like, let's go. Get your shoes on. And Luke Combs had came in and was gonna drill to get some weight off. So I was like, kind of like getting the guys warmed up, and then I was kind of finishing working out with Luke, just to kind of keep his weight going after the high school practice. And then you came in, and Luke like kind of stopped, and he's like, "Oh dang," and I'm like, "What?" And he's like, "That's Sean Sheets." I'm like. John Sheets. I'm like, how do I know that name? He's like, he coached here for a long time. Oh yeah, yeah. And he told me the story about yeah, so a story when you were coaching the little kids, and he was in that practice, and there were some tears, but
Oh,
it's kind of funny thinking about that eighth grade group, man, because like that was a pretty fun group, and I think like when we were coaching together, I mean, like you said, it's a community, but like we've been around those kids for 4 years, you know, like through more stuff than just wrestling, like built relationship. I mean, you already had relationship with their parents, but like building relationship with their parents and their families and like hanging out with them, like going on trips and um this is we got a couple more weeks, and I think I was trying to tell them I saw this old picture. I have it somewhere on my phone. If I find it, I'll share it with you. But it's like it was a picture of these eighth graders and looking at them and how young they look and like, thinking about how they look now. But I think I showed Jackson it, and I'm like, and I think I told this to Andrew and Trey too. I'm like, what's gonna be cool is like this was before you guys came to high school. I'm like, we're gonna take a picture at when you guys are done, like at senior night and at graduation. Like that's gonna be cool, like this full circle kind of moment.
yeah.
But I think I don't know, like it's kind of like what you said earlier, like our coaches' roles. I think again, kind of dealing with our egos a little bit. Um, I kind of had that chip on my shoulder for a long time, but it's still a little bit there, and I'm not sure if it'll ever totally go away, but I think it's like the coaching group that we have right now. I think, yeah, we kind of get on each other's nerves a little bit. Maybe if one of us was making the decision, we do things a little bit differently, but I think it's fun when we get to kind of work together because I think you put everybody in the right spot doing the right role. I think we do all pretty good job, and I think it takes a complete group to kind of mold, a young group of people.
Yeah, and I think honestly, man, you get enough coaches that are passionate and there's no friction, they're probably not very passionate. So, I don't mind the fact that every once in a while we have differing opinions and we're passionate about those opinions. But I think overall, everybody's what I bank on is that everybody's heart's in the right place, that we all care about the kids. And that's been awesome. And that's something that I'm super grateful that I've been a part of. And I've talked to many people that if there's one thing I know about Coach Batista is he loves these kids. So, that's been awesome. Being a parent on the team too is, just being able to have a coach that I trust, that I know that, you really do care about these kids and they're not just tools for your accolades, right? Like you deeply care about these kids, and that's why I trust you. I trust you with my son. I trust you with all these other kids that I love, and so yeah, it's been a great experience, man. I've had, even at 43, I've learned a lot over these past 4 years. You've put up with some of my blow ups in the corner, and that's been a humbling experience. The last 4 years is coaching my son. I'll tell you, I've always been a pretty intense person, uh, very hard on the sleeve type, and sometimes your best trait can become your worst trait in a flash. And, I've done that, but I think, a lot of self-reflection, again, that wrestling tool of like outside of that moment when I've done something that's maybe embarrassing or, haven't reacted right in the moment, I go and I'm very self-reflective and I don't, overly dwell on, trying to blame outside circumstances. I really kind of look inside and like try to figure out like what's the root of the problem. What do I need to fix? And, sometimes honestly, man, as a dad and a coach, like, man, that ego rears its ugly head, dude, and it makes you do some ugly things. And so it's been a process the last 4 years of coaching my son is just like, continually really trying to check my ego and remember that like, man, don't ruin the experience because I'm so fortunate that I've got to do this with him and his friends. I've like, his friends call me for all kinds of things, and that's a blessing, man. And if I don't act right in that corner and I let my ego get in the way, I could really jeopardize all that. And I've kind of, stepped on that line a couple times, and fortunately, even my wife, she draws the line and says nope. So, forcing me to go in that dark hallway like I used to, after losing a wrestling match and
Yeah.
to sit there and self-reflect, deal with my emotions and figure out like, are they displaced? And yeah, a lot of time they are, in the moment of disappointment and anger and all those things. Those are usually misguided emotions that it's good to reflect on and kind of get rid of them and move forward in a more positive way. And This year's been much better at doing that, and um, just it's led to just a deeper connection with my son, and he wants to go on and wrestle in college. So there was a point where I think he was teetering on whether or not that sounded good to him, and the fact that his passion has grown has been something where I've had to step back. I think we had a oh man, remind me of his name. I think he just made the world team. Wrestler at Oklahoma State, upper weight guy. I know you're real good with the names.
Wyatt Hendrickson?
No, not Wyatt, not the heavyweight. Like 97s, I believe he was. He was friends with Andrew Bloomhoff. He spoke at one of our Wrestling with Faith.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
I think of his name.
Yeah, yeah.
Anyhow,
Yep, he wrestled 184, not
yeah,
97s.
he just made the world team, right?
Uh,
Thought I saw
he
something
just wrestled
where.
at Zagreb,
There we go.
at the ranking series. It'll come to me in a couple seconds.
All right. Well, when you
Yep.
think of
Yeah,
his
he's from
name,
Bakersfield. He's missing his teeth.
he was born in
Yep.
Bakersfield and then moved to Oklahoma. And yeah, anyway, which we didn't know that when we did the Wrestling with Faith. But anyhow, like he jumped on and he did one of those. And one of the keys he told the kids was, when it was no longer about his dad, when his dad stepped back and wrestling became his, like his passion for it grew. And so I remember hearing that and being like, all right, I got to step back. I got to step back. And I think even with you guys as coaches, I think, I don't know if you remember some of the times where, you guys maybe wanted me to get on them for this or that, like some kind of wrestling punishments, right? And I'm like, well, I'm not doing that anymore. That's you guys, right? Like, and it's not that I'm telling you guys not to, like, I think there's consequences, but, I just really wanted to step more into that dad role and, less of a coach role. And I still do both for sure, but I definitely know which one's more important, and which one is actually going to be the relationship that's going to last. And again, that starts right back to where we started. You know, wrestling with
Yeah.
him and being able to coach him has been fun, but being a dad and having that relationship going forward is a lot more important than, putting pressure on him to achieve any certain accolade along the way.
I think about that a lot. Obviously, Emma and I want to have kids, and I would like them to get into wrestling just because I think it's just obviously so good for people to do, boys and girls.
Hmm.
And again, I think I'm pretty impressionable. I think I've maybe been less impressionable as I've gotten older, but again, before, when I still had that little bit of a chip on my shoulder, I was really trying to figure myself out. I think being around you and Carlo and being around your families and thinking about um, what I would like my life to be like. It's like, yeah, I want to have a family. Like I want to be very stable and have a home and build a home with my wife. Like that sounds pretty cool. And I think I was trying to think like, what I want my future to look like. And I think being a parent and trying to have it to balance like our life with like wrestling, I feel like that's going to be tough on top of being able to have to coach at the same time. Um, Man, I don't know. I feel like people that I've had on the show, like Adam Tirapelli came on, I've talked to him about it a little bit, and other people that have had to like coach their kids. And I think it's one of those things where he said something that was pretty good, and I don't know if you saw it, but I'll share it with you. It's like, I just want in 20 years for me and my son to be able to go to the national tournament together and like watch wrestling and enjoy it. You know
Mm.
what I mean? And
Yeah.
it's like you think about how Adam did that with his dad, Steve, and it's like he wants to be able to do that with like Dylan. Like you know what I mean? Where they could all just enjoy it together. And it's like that's what I want. Like I just want to be able to enjoy this with my kids. And I think
Yeah.
if you make it like coaching them and if you make it all about the winning part, I mean obviously you don't do that, but I think what's tough is like if you see moments of maybe they're not wrestling at the standard that you want them to wrestle at, that's what gets hard. And I think that's where I've seen you get maybe fired up. It's not even the fact that like, Trayton's losing. It's just like he didn't wrestle hard in that one moment or he didn't make the choice that you wanted to make in that one moment. That's what gets you fired up. But it's
Yeah.
like how do you kind of deal with it in the moment because you've gotten better at it this year
Yeah.
compared to last year.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously Trayton's gotten better, so maybe that makes it a little bit easier, but
Yeah, I mean, actually, it's almost makes it harder in a sense, right? I mean, unless they're completely, which is not realistic in most cases, to think that your kid's gonna just go out and dominate every single match, right? So, what I was gonna say is that forcing my expectations upon him is something that I realize is kind of what causes blowups a lot of the time when I have certain expectations and, quote unquote, get my hopes up that, he's going to turn the corner that I want him to turn when I want him to turn it,
Yeah.
right? Um, that's when, the blowups happen is when I'm forcing my expectations on him. And, um, I think there's a difference between, seeing their potential and trying to encourage them towards it, and then, maybe getting too caught up in the moment and allowing your expectations to steer you down a dark path. And um, I think, like we said, those some of those moments where I haven't been my best self, when I did go walk off and cool off and reflect on it, it was really realizing that like I allowed myself to really start thinking he was going to do this or that, and it was all my expectations, and really, um, like we talked about earlier, is everybody's path of development's different. I've been reading one of Nick Perler's books, and
Yeah. Yeah. I saw you reading it the other day.
yeah, yeah, and it's pretty straightforward. It's pretty simple, and a lot of these things, it's not things that are new to us, but maybe they just reinforce it, or maybe they turn the light bulb on where we're not doing it. And what I like about his book is he goes into both the mindset as a competitor, how should you approach it, like all these different aspects of wrestling, and then as a coach and as a parent, and kind of being able to see him walk through that with his plethora of experience, was something I was like, hey, that's probably something I should read. And um, one of the things he talks about in there is everybody's passion grows at different times.
Yeah.
And, this again goes back to like kind of humbling yourself with God's patience is like, you got to wait until that fire lights in them. And there's different reasons. I mean, sometimes it's just that a certain loss. And, unfortunately, a lot of the times it's a lack of self-belief. I've read some books on mental toughness and this and that. And, um, I've come to learn that, a lot of mental toughness is determined by how much we think we can achieve the goal, right? We're willing to do more when we think we can get to the end goal. And something I've thought about a lot and I've really been able to finally put into place is realizing that, all these years, even back, of coaching Trayton, my son, and telling him what I see and telling him how talented I think he is and telling him that I think he could be this or that level of a wrestler, um, actually just put more pressure on him. I thought I was encouraging and like, oh man, I'm telling you, you should believe this, right? And I've had to learn that like, nah, he had to get some of those wins, and even having him come off the mat this year and tell me about the ranked opponent he beat this time, right? Like, oh, it beat
Yeah.
number 16, Dad. And I'm like, all right, son. Well, I understand that surprised you. It doesn't surprise me, because like, he can't see through the woods, right? He's still in them.
Yeah.
And I'm
Yeah.
standing outside the woods thinking like, hey, like you got
You
this.
can come out here like whenever you
Yeah, I'm like
want.
it's fine, you got this, and he's he doesn't know, and so he doesn't realize that it's just a little bit more ahead, and you're out of the woods. And anyway, so just seeing that, actually having some of those moments, and my wife getting upset even when he came off the mat again, and he's like, I beat the number, that's like he's number 12, Dad, or whatever, right? And again, I just kind of dismiss it, and I wasn't dismissing it. It's just like I have a different way of looking at it. And for him, it was like, no, I've arrived, like I have confidence now, like I can wrestle, and I wasn't really seeing it that way. I was seeing it as like, well, you're putting these guys on a pedestal, dude. And, I just seeing that, like that intrinsic confidence, and that, we can't force it into them. And, that sometimes putting big expectations on them just because we see talent can be negative. And so that's something I've really thought about a lot lately. And as we come into the end of the season, I want to make sure that I don't put that kind of pressure on him. I want to try to enjoy it. And so, you know, praying on those things, I've been doing that this year in the morning. Um, and then, yeah, just like being willing to accept where he's at and realizing that it's his journey, it's his path, and my job is to encourage him. So I've been trying to do that. I do believe in tough love too, though, and
Yeah.
all of that. But you know, figuring out where that line is and balancing it's not easy. And I think one of the other things we learned, I got three boys, is each one of them respond differently. And I've seen that in wrestling where, one of my boys, I can kind of jump on him pretty hard and, he's going to react in a positive way, where another one's going to be like, yeah, forget this. I don't want to do it then. Yeah, yeah. And I've straight up seen it and been like, oh man. And again, where I think wrestling pays dividends is I was able to go to my 8-year-old son and be like, hey, dude, like, I didn't approach that right. I'm sorry. Will you forgive me? And, I really want you to do this. And, I was wrong. And I'd really like it if you try again, because he wasn't going to wrestle anymore. He didn't like that
Was
interaction.
that Uriah or Judah?
That was Judah, is my youngest. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, man, again, the sport just continues to to humble me and teach me over and over again. And so I'm so grateful for it, man. And it was, wrestling taught me a lot of truths that, when I did start digging into the Bible more and start, hearing testimonials and, uh, listening to books by, you know, like Mere Christianity and by C.S. Lewis and things like that. Being able to recognize those hard truths that we don't want to accept, our ego doesn't want to accept. Wrestling kind of softened me up to realizing that, like, yeah, a lot of these things, that it teaches us about discipline is actually freedom, and sometimes when we indulge in things, we're holding ourselves back from our full self, and um, the selflessness that we got to have in wrestling sometimes to achieve the goal, and all these different things. And chosen suffering, I actually listened to Tom Ryan's book,
Yeah.
was something I was doing driving around for work, and hearing his story, man, I'm eternally grateful for that, because he just really listened to that man, spill his heart about his experience and how the loss of his son led him down a path to search for truth. Really made me question, like, how hard have you searched for truth, Sean? And so anyhow, yeah, those
It's a
things.
good book.
Yeah, it was a great book, and it led me. I listened to some of the books he read and read some of those books, and it just continued to grow from there. And you know, um, you know, yeah, I think some of those traits that I had in wrestling that made me successful. Um, without coming to God, and without really softening my heart in those ways, and being able to read scripture that kind of shows me where maybe my approach needs to change. Um, Man, I feel like I'd have a lot more turmoil in marriage and in fatherhood and coaching, in my interactions with parents. Like, man, it's given me so many good answers when I struggle for them sometimes. And I go to a church service, or I read my scripture in the morning or my devotional, and it's like, man, it gives me the most wise words, to share, either to myself or to a friend whose kid's struggling, or whatever. Yeah, it's been great.
I think it's interesting how I was just kind of thinking about like being ready for stuff, and I think kind of wrestling maybe allows you maybe to handle things in a way where like you're gonna figure out a solution, because I think you kind of learn the tools of like patience and like some grit and like some resilience and things like that. And I think about, things that I've tried to develop, as a person. And I think again, you and Carlo and a few other guys have been like responsible, I think, for me just kind of being able to see how you guys handle stuff. And a few years ago, I was not ready to get married. I think in my head, I thought I was like I was ready, but I don't think until I met the right person, and the person was willing to handle and show me grace and show me patience. And we're both able to kind of share that together. I think I was like, all right, like we can do this together. You know what I mean? Because it
Yeah.
can't just be one ended. It's got to be both people got to be committed to the same thing. Grace and resilience and patience. Um,
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think that, something that I've studied a lot is the mirror effect that Jesus has, which means that, when you can gaze upon somebody, and again, this goes back to some of the most instrumental people in my life that I think, have been a bright light, is people that can look at you and see you for your best self, even at your worst moment. And that's kind of what we look for in our confidant in marriage, is somebody that's going to still, spur us along, even when we're maybe down. Um, and they see us for our best self. They don't, one of the magic things that, or not magic, but I guess, the thing that God does is grace, right? Which grace means that, he doesn't judge us for our past. He sees us, he sees us for our full self and what we can be, not for what we did. Um, and I think that that's something in marriage that when we build our relationship with him, we're able to try to emulate that. And when we're in positive relationships, we want to offer that to other people, right? And yeah, dude, I think that our wives, yes, are an important part to softening our heart. Society, the world tells us as men that, we got to be a certain way, and we kind of wear those masks, right? Hypocrite, right? The word hypocrite literally means to wear a mask. And I think we all learn to wear a mask as we go through life, and you go through wrestling, you learn to be a tough guy, and, you learn to you think that, your emotions, you can always check them and all those things. And then you get married and you better figure out that, hey, you better pay attention to emotions, and you better pay attention to, it's not just about the goal, it's about the process, and, all those things that, they kind of just drive home for us. And, um,
They're easy to say
no.
too. You know what I mean? They're so easy to say. So no, it's we're process oriented, but it's like, man, you go through a tough moment with your wife or, with somebody that you care about. It's like, gosh dang it. Like, but that's it. That's what the whole thing is. I think trying to think. I think it was a few years ago, Arabalo. I think we were up the whole night. We were talking, and I know you don't sleep very well at hotel rooms, but I think I don't know if you remember this, but one of the things we were talking about, I think, is resistance. How important resistance is, because like if you're lifting weights, it's like, well, how do you get stronger? It's like, well, you have to put weight on the bar. You got to tear up your muscles, and then the recovery part is how actually you kind of grow back stronger. You got to meet that resistance in life, because if you don't, you're not going to get stronger. You're not going to learn how to deal with it, and you're not going to like the process of dealing with it afterward. Like the recovery part is also how you learn and grow and get stronger. Um, but I was thinking about that a lot, and it's like, all these moments that we have in our life, it's like we determine what we get out of them. And I think, it's things that like we talk about with kids at practice is like going to practice, like that is the most important part of your week because like that's how you're gonna meet your resistance. You know what I mean? And it might be not even going live. It might be, dude, we gotta freaking drill this position for 6 minutes. Like, I already know this position. Why do I have to drill it again? Or like
Yeah.
just being dealing with being bored at practice. You know what I mean? Like that's resistance too. It's like
Being uncomfortable.
yeah, being uncomfortable. Even if it's just like, hey, stand there. You know what I mean? Like be uncomfortable for however long.
Yeah.
But that's so important for our kids, I think, to be able to deal with because it just pays dividends so much down the road.
Yeah, and one of the things that we've been trying to do a lot, and I've kind of taken the role more. You guys, wrestle more with the kids. So this season, I hurt my knee and stuff. So try to spend a lot of time talking to the kids about the mental approach. Those kind of things that you're talking about, and you know, um, realizing that you're not going to be confident stepping on the line. We can't be too soft on kids. Like you got to do hard things. I think I read in a book that if as parents all we ever do, if we take away the hard things from our kids every time they struggle, we compensate for them. We leave them feeling small because they only ever accomplish small things, right?
Yeah.
To feel big, we got to accomplish big things, and to accomplish big things, we got to fail. And so learning that process in wrestling forces it down our throat, right? To get good at taking shots, you're probably going to get sprawled on and your face shoved in the mat, and you're going to have to keep trying to do it and making little adjustments, right? Marriage is the same way,
Yeah.
right?
Well, it's funny.
Yeah, get your face shoved in the mat to figure it out.
Well, yeah, because it's like, well, now there's a problem. Like, if my
Mhm.
face is getting shoved in the mat, I don't like that. I should probably, figure out how to make sure this doesn't happen again.
Yeah,
But right before you hopped on, I was looking at this article, and it's funny. Like, my Instagram algorithm is like always like, these random like health studies or like how to like mind hack something or whatever. This guy was talking about how parents need to prepare the kid for the road, not prepare the road for the kid. And it doesn't mean like
love it.
not taking everything off the road. You know what I mean? Like things that are gonna like kill your kid. We need to make sure we get those out of the way. but like they were showing two pictures of playgrounds, and one is like from back in the day where it's like things are made of metal, and there's like a zip line that this girl's on, and she's like this, and like if she falls off, she's probably gonna like skin her knee. You know what I mean? She's gonna fall on some wood chips and she's gonna get hurt. Or if she, does something weird. I actually broke my wrist on one of those things in middle school. But and then it showed a picture of playgrounds now, and they're all like soft colors, and they're all like sloped. There's no hard angles, and it's all like lower to the ground. And then they put stuff on the ground, so it's not just wood chips. It's like stuff under the
Rubber.
wood chips to kind of absorb more of the.
Yeah.
So like it's basically designed so that if something happens, you're probably not going to get hurt. But if you do, like the lawyers like have it set up where the park or whatever is not going to get sued. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
But it's like you want your kid to get hurt, so that way your kid figures out how to not get hurt.
Well, it's accountability, right? I
Yeah,
mean, that's what we love about the sport of wrestling. I think we were talking about today, like, Coach Carlo telling the kids, I think the end of practice, part of their finish was 50 push-ups and I think it was 25 V-ups. Um, anyhow, that's what I heard. Hopefully I did it right because I participated in it and it was funny, man. I'm sitting there not in great shape right now, all this stuff, trying to do these push-ups. And I hate to say it, but I mean, it was hard. But as I'm sitting there doing it, I'm like, man, I gotta hold myself accountable here. I gotta do all of them, right? And Coach Carlo was telling the kids, like, it's on you guys. It'll show up on the mat. If you guys don't do them, it's up to you. And so that accountability factor, right? And in a world where we keep trying to soften the blow and adjust the road to the kid instead of preparing the kid for the road, um, wrestling's a place that it's been hard to do that, right? Like
yeah.
I'll tell you, as a parent, obviously, it's hard to watch your kid struggle, and wrestling again, we talked about it earlier, you know, man, it brings out. It's funny even watching like some of these parents, right? Andrew, I remember his mom when she first got, oh, this is so fun, right? And then now today, 3.5 years later, like she's a mess, right? Because it just becomes so much. And
Yeah.
and as your kid invests more in it, obviously it means more. And so, those are lessons that I took with me in wrestling, honestly, too, is, the more I invested in wrestling, the more I was willing to fight for it when I stepped on the line. And when I stepped back from that level of investment, so did my willingness to fight. You know what I mean? And so, I like to transition that into marriage, right? The more you invest in your marriage, the more you're going to fight for it, right? The more you invest in your family, the more you put time into that. And if you say it's important to you, then you better put time and put other things aside. And, those are things that it's life's tough to balance. I also still have, a lot of competitiveness in me, a lot of aspirations. I wanted to build this business and have my own brokerage and all of those things. But then I also want to be a good dad and I also want to be a coach and all these different things. And, just figuring out what's most important and um, backing that up with your actions and your time, I think is huge. And, wrestling taught me that truth too, that hard truth. When I wasn't putting the time in, the things didn't come, like they did when I did. And so, and my willingness to fight for it just, deteriorated. And, um, we can make excuses for it or we can own it. We can blame the ref or we can say we should have got another takedown. Um, and so that ownership and, but willingness to fail and get better, and to fight for things. I think those are great traits, and hopefully, we're doing a good job of passing on those traits to the kids we coach. And
I think we got a good team, man. Like not in terms of just like skill and stuff, but just how they kind of handle themselves. Like I think again, we have a big group of seniors, but then we also have like a good mix of young guys in there too. And I was thinking about the other day, like just like not having to worry about the bed checks because I know they're all going to go to sleep. Like I know they are going to go to sleep. You know what I mean? Like they've been coached up enough to know that. And it's the same thing like they're all going to get their push-ups. You know what I mean? There might be a couple that maybe, miss a couple reps, but like as majority of them, they're going to get all of them. They're not going to miss any. And I
yeah,
think that's just it's kind of cool just kind of seeing where the culture maybe had been during COVID and it was pretty rough just because, it was kind of rough everywhere. And then just, slowly over the past few seasons since kind of coming back from that, it's like it's pretty established. It's not perfect, and it never will be, but it just makes coaching a lot more fun.
Yeah, I love the
The season goes
community.
by so quick, you
Yeah,
know.
we've built a really good community as a team. I think at the high school level, the club level, the community keeps building, and like you alluded to, during COVID, I think a lot of people, you know, lost that, sense of community, and I think people are still longing for that. We have a lot of divisiveness, and I love wrestling, man. It just brings us all together, gives us a common goal, forces us to do hard things, forces us to check our emotions, forces us to hold ourselves accountable. Um, yeah, there's a lot of reasons to love the sport. Um, and I think that, as we evolve as coaches and we learn from the past, one of the things that I think is really come to light is how much we need to try to encourage our kids to not make it their identity and just use it as something, to find their identity in something more sustainable, and to use, you can love the sport of wrestling, but any single match and even any single season doesn't define who you are as a person, and that's something that honestly I've had to grapple with and let go of and see kids as more than just wrestlers, and it's been an important thing to grow.
Well, we're getting close into the hour, but I do want to. I told you this was going to go by quick. But dude, one thing that I do kind of, and this is a big question, but we were talking about identity. I feel like if I hadn't made wrestling my identity when I was younger, I'm not sure I would have gotten as better at the rate that I did. Um, I think the trick is though, and you can kind of jump in whenever, but the trick is, it's like when you're done is learning how to like get away from that. And that's like in a lot of ways, I think kind of like an ego death a little bit. It's like you kind of have to move on and take the things from it. And that's a hard thing that I think a lot of people struggle with. But when you get so caught up into something and so focused and so driven, it becomes very easy for it to become how you define yourself just because your world kind of revolves around it. How do you kind of maybe not necessarily revolve your world around it, but in a lot of ways it still kind of is. How do you kind of deal with that? And do you feel like that's something that you can still kind of reach a level of success, at least that you did when you were in high school?
um, Trying to grasp with the question. Sorry.
Yeah, so thinking about like identity, like do you feel like if, wrestling wasn't your identity when you were in high school, do you think you still would have done the things that you would have done? Do you feel
Oh,
like that's important?
no, I mean, it was important, but it is also like a big struggle, I think, for a long time. Um, when I wasn't reaching the level of success that I thought I should be. Think it and not having a different foundation to lean on. Um, I think it caused a lot of years of struggle and pain, to be honest. And so, yeah, I think, it's really tough, right? Is finding that balance. But we see more and more examples of it, I think. Whether it's, just recently with the Seattle Seahawks. I don't know if you've read much about the coach, McDonald or whatnot. Might be saying it wrong. But anyhow, he bought his whole team, Bibles because he couldn't think of a better way to show love to a bunch of men that could buy whatever they wanted for themselves.
Hmm.
And so he bought the whole team Bibles, and I've read some articles about how much his faith has grown in the last couple of years, and how that's the foundation of the success that they found in this team, is really just showing love to each other. You know, um, so. I used to think probably a lot more so that like it had to, I had to be that level of obsessed and to have that as um, my everything. I mean, I literally it was so important, right? And it was, the basis of my value in myself was my ability to perform in wrestling, right? But that's unhealthy,
Yeah.
I think that sometimes, different things in life happen. I lost my brother as a freshman in college. And that was a tough thing to try to just be tough and think that I was going to be able to wrestle through that. And, I think that because my identity was so heavily tied to that, to wrestling and stuff. Maybe at a time when I probably needed to take some time to figure out other things. I kind of beat myself up with the sport for a long time and felt more and more worthless, by kind of perpetuating this cycle of losing, right? So I think that's something that can happen in the sport, especially when we too much tie our value to winning and losing. I mean, that's what happens when your identity is tied to the sport, right? It's pretty funny. I was watching Cool Runnings with my
Yeah.
son the other day, and
Nice.
uh, Tom Candy, right? That's his name.
Yeah.
Um,
Is it John Candy or Tom Candy?
John Candy, yeah, John Candy was going into the board that oversees the bobsledding committee, and long story short, he had cheated earlier, in his life, and I guess it's based on a true story. So anyway, he had cheated earlier, and his former coach that he got caught cheating, and they got disqualified, and his former coach now sits on the board, and he's a part of deciding that they're going to disqualify this Jamaican team, and they kind of made up some rules to basically make it so they couldn't qualify, even though they did, right? And so he goes in to kind of protest it, and he looks at the coach that he had worked for, or I mean, competed for, and that he got that coach's team disqualified. And he says, "Is this about me?" Blah blah blah. And he says, "If it's about me, don't punish these guys. They didn't do that. I did that. I cheated." And he kind of owned it, right? It was a really cool moment. I never realized when I watched the show before, but he owned his own mistake, and um, you know, and then I think it goes on to another scene, and one of the lead bobsled guy that steers the bobsled, they're sitting in there, and they're kind of he got their competition back, right? Like he was able to persuade the board to allow them to compete and not do what he did, which is basically cheat to make sure they didn't compete, right? And he said, "Don't do what I did just because I did it to get me back," right? It's that whole vengeance thing, right? Like
Yeah.
lower yourself to somebody else's level. But then he gets to the lead bobsledder, and the bobsledder wants to know, like, "Hey, why'd you do it?" And he goes, "Oh, you want to know why I cheated?" And he says, "Well, uh, when your whole identity and you base your whole life on winning, you'll do anything to do it."
Hmm.
And it's the same thing with money. It's the same thing with, if we build our identity in wrestling, like we'll do bad things. I mean, we go back to, I don't know if you remember the story of Nancy Kerrigan, since we got the
Yeah.
Olympics
Yeah,
going.
dude.
I mean, there's a story of Nancy Kerrigan. I mean, it sounds crazy, but when your whole identity and your whole value is tied up in a worldly prize, you got a problem. And so, I'm fortunate that there were some great seeds planted again in those relationships early in my life that turned me back to kind of finding a better foundation, and turning to that foundation. And I just see that continue to bear good fruit. So, um, yeah, man, I think that can you have wrestling success, and do we put that on a pedestal and think that it means more than it does? Yeah, I think we do. Um, I think that when people show resilience and character, in life, period, like that's inspirational. And I think that you know, if when things don't go your way and your identity's caught up. I mean, we've seen kids that got too much pressure on them. Their identity, their value, is tied up to that. Like it's not always positive. And I've seen kids who have been extremely successful in the sport too that have a lot of other holes, in their full self. And
Yeah.
so I think that when we put too much emphasis on it, and we do put I think it can be toxic. And so yeah, I would say at 43 and kind of a changed person. I would rather help kids, build it on another foundation and just use the talents they've been given. If they love the sport of wrestling and they have a passion for it, then use it to glorify God and make sure you keep your identity in that.
Absolutely, man. Well, dude, it's been absolutely blast having you on. You got any final words before we cut it?
No, man, let's work hard these last few weeks and go have fun with these kids, and kind of relish the moments, and let's see what they can do, and then let's encourage them in the next step of their life and look forward to it, man. And don't blink because, as you know, man, it goes fast.